I promise I talk about succession in this, but this is more so using succession to look at our conglomerates and democracy. If you want an essay just about succession, this may not be for you. But I do think the subject is rather important, so please, watch.
Why shouldn't we do all the news?
Why shouldn't we do all the news?
Well,
Kim Jong-pop, because that's not how things work in this country.
You just love telling people what to think, don't you?
Fuck off.
In the first volume of Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, Tocqueville discusses the American press in the early 1800s. The French political philosopher was fascinated by the American press as, unlike the very concentrated and centralized press from his home country, the American press was continuously growing and tremendously spread out. He observed that, in America, freedom of press and freedom of speech were synonymous. Therefore, there were no restrictions on who can start their own periodical. These restrictions would be restrictions on freedom of speech. Printers did not need licenses, and newspapers did not need to be registered. The creation of a newspaper is a simple and easy undertaking. A few subscribers are enough for a journalist to cover his costs. So, the number of periodical or semi-periodical writing in the United States passes all belief, he writes. In other words, people were starting their own newspapers left and right. He notes that even the smallest of towns has at least one local paper. That said, Tocqueville also mentions that this created intense competition, which prevented most from making substantial profit. As a result, those with capital had very little interest in investing in the press. For there to be substantial return, one would have to own too many different outlets. The money was best invested elsewhere. This kept most voices of the press completely independent from one another. While he recognized the impressive size of the American press, he also believed this to be its greatest weakness. The way he saw it, there were too many different voices in the American press for any of them to have a great impact, especially in a country where all voices are equal. Because there were so many different voices, most of which lacked any form of convergence, it was impossible for a single message to sweep the nation in any substantial way. Additionally, even if several periodicals all proposed a similar idea, they would likely propose several different executions to reach said idea. However, Tocqueville believed that if, somehow, many different voices of the press were to synergize to distribute a united message, the size of the American press would make this message so overwhelming that the people would have no choice but to succumb to it. He says, when a large number of organs of the press come to advance along the same track, their influence becomes almost irresistible in the long term, and public opinion, struck always from the same side, ends by yielding under their blows. In What It Takes, Succession illustrates that power. In this episode, the Roy family, majority shareholders of media conglomerate Waystar Royco, go to a Republican conference to decide which candidate their different media outlets will support. Or, as they put it,
So, what is this actually here?
This is just a nice political conference of like-minded donors and intellectuals.
AKA picking the next president. Selecto el presidento.
that's not really how it works.
Yeah, no, sure, but yeah.
they aren't kidding. The reality of the situation settles in for Greg as he watches his family fraternize with the different candidates, discussing what they could do for each other, with little to no care for how this may affect the people. For Waystar Royco, it's a play to see who would be the most favorable candidate for the company. For the Roy family members, it's a play to try to get their father's approval, hoping that if they bring him a marketable enough candidate, Logan will favor them over the others. They care so little for the world out of that room that they settle with supporting a candidate most of the family recognizes to be borderline fascist.
Yeah, done.
He's talked about burning Qurans and licensing press credentials.
He's shifting the Overton window.
I'm surprised you know what that
Burning
fucking
Qurans.
is.
I do.
He's opening it and throwing union organizers out of it.
Stop chicken littling us. It just makes us want to have a nap.
Stop being a dirty little pixie and whispering swastikas in Dad's ear.
Boom! There you go again. So fucking Route 1.
I'm not saying it's going to be the full Third Reich, but I am genuinely concerned that we could slide into a Russian Berlusconi Brazilian fuck pile.
You have a trophy husband and several fur coats. I think you're going to be fine.
Tom, who do you like?
Me, I think Shiv talks a lot of sense.
Although we are yet to see the outcome of the election, we, as an audience, are reminded of the influence Logan Roy held over the Raisin, his affectionate nickname for the current president. And we understand that the same thing happened there. What makes this even more impactful is the notion that this decision is made in one evening. The dilemma only lasts an episode. The Roy family is making a decision that affects the world, and to them, it's not that important. Sure, it helps, but it's a small conflict for them compared to everything going on with Waystar Royka. They may not actually pick the next president, but they clearly have a very, very large impact. This episode is possibly one of the most hilarious yet terrifying of the show. Because while Waystar Royko, the Roy family, and the candidate chosen may be fictional, the situation isn't. The media landscape Tocqueville wrote about in the early 1800s is not at all the media landscape we find ourselves in today. The press ended up being quite profitable as a business venture. As a result, corporations got involved, creating multiple media outlets of their own and acquiring others. With time, these corporations were able to choke out the smaller competition by eliminating or acquiring them, leaving the media landscape to the giants and the giants alone. As we saw with Walter in Celebration, the first episode of Succession, when something new makes waves, a conglomerate will find a way to consume it. And, as we discovered in the next season, in the episode named after Walter, these acquisitions are less about true potential and more about controlling the competition, as these conglomerates will often shut down their acquired assets with very little hesitation when numbers start falling. Nowadays, almost all the media we consume is owned by 6 media conglomerates resembling Waystar Royka. In fact, the character of Logan Roy is in part based on Rupert Murdoch, founder and chairman of both News Corp and the Fox Corporation, which were once one and the same. Together, these two corporations owned the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Times, Fox News, Storyful, Times Radio, TMZ, Credible, and countless other news platforms. And this is having already sold a large part of its catalog to Disney and other competitors. Over a decade ago, News Corp essentially had a media presence around the world, with local papers from New York to Hong Kong, a social media presence through their ownership of MySpace, control over the Asian satellite network Star TV, controlling interests in DirecTV, and so much more. News Corp was able to beam its programming to over 40 million people at the time. They had a slice of pie in every pie in the media game.
3 divisions: entertainment, news, and resorts, working together to provide a net that can hold the world or catapult it forward to the next adventure.
The Murdoch family have a 39% majority stake in both these corporations, and it's fairly clear that these are the inspiration for Waystar Royka. The similarities are made even more obvious when looking at the Roy's biggest media asset, ATN, a clear representation of the Murdochs' Fox News. Creator Jesse Armstrong may claim that the Roy family itself is not particularly based on the Murdochs, though apparently the family drama somewhat matches, especially when considering Rupert Murdoch is still exercising his role as chairman at the age of 91, and has once answered that he'd run the company forever if it were up to him. Certainly sounds like Logan Roy. That said, even if the family is not based on the Murdochs, their assets certainly are. And so is their relationship with the president. You see, through their array of media outlets, the Murdochs have successfully aided in the election of multiple New York mayors, some American presidents, and at the very least, 2 British prime ministers. This ability to influence the democratic process, in turn, builds them a strong relationship with the elected politicians, and politicians hoping to win the election. A perfect example of this is seen in Rupert Murdoch's close relationship supporting United Kingdom Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her eventual successor, John Major, whom Murdoch supported for the 1992 general election. This relationship seemingly worked in his favor as well, as, when Murdoch made his bid to purchase the Times, the Thatcher government allowed the purchase to take place without making any reference to the Monopolies and Mergers Commission, even though it was common practice to refer to it at the time. This isn't speculation, by the way. It's confirmed that the two met in private to discuss this. According to The Guardian, through Thatcher, Murdoch was able to acquire and control almost 40% of the British press. We are reminded of the Roy's relationship with the Raisin. They put him in his throne, and he bends the law for them from time to time. When he stops bending the law for them, they take him out of the throne.
Here they are, the family who lost us a presidency.
How is he? The Raisin.
He's out of a job in 6 months. Lame in the interim, and the GOP is in flames. We're all doing backflips.
Sorry about that.
He's got a serious condition. We felt the country needed to know.
And it's more than safe to assume that through this level of media centralization, the Murdochs were able to largely influence, if not control, the democratic process, just as the Roys seem to believe they can. According to a study published by the Quarterly Journal of Economics in 2007, Fox News was able to get an audience out of 17.3% of the American population in its first 4 years alone. The same study finds that the channel successfully convinced 3 to 8% of its non-Republican audience to vote Republican. It would be foolish to assume their other media outlets do not have an impact of their own as well. So yeah, if ATN is an imitation of Fox News, and the Roys represent the Murdochs, they probably can choose who becomes the next president with near certainty. Simply giving a specific candidate more coverage than the others is often enough to guarantee them far more success than their competition, especially when it's good coverage. As media conglomerates do this, we watch democracy erode from both sides. On the one hand, our choices become controlled by the media we consume, and on the other, our governments stop protecting us from how the media uses its power. What's tragic about this is that there isn't really any avoiding it. Though the age of the internet has reignited Tocqueville's claim that anyone could put out their writing if they really want to, conglomerates are not limiting themselves to traditional media. If you have an impact that's noticeable enough, you will eventually be made that offer that you cannot refuse.
Some of you may have noticed servers are down, and we're setting a satellite office on 7, and I'm afraid I have to inform you, you are all dismissed. Yeah, you're all fired. So if you can leave your laptops where they are and hand in your passes, security will be coming around now. Been through everything you've shown me. Food and weed. Those are the only 2 verticals driving revenue, so we're folding them in. And yeah, you're all free to leave.
This is a joke.
You have 15 minutes to gather your belongings and exit the building. Separation agreements will be handed around shortly. 1 week of severance per year served. With full non-disclosure, post your little videos, you get 3 days. Unused vacation days will not be reimbursed. Health benefits will be terminated at the end of the month. That's it. I'd like to thank you all for your hard work.
You piece of shit!
Really, stories like Walter's are very, very common. In fact, there's a lot of online discourse about which new media company Walter is supposed to represent. Their rise in the new media landscape, the company's management style, their acquisitions from traditional media, and their eventual demise resembles the path of many different outlets. Their shock value listicles and headlines are very reminiscent from those seen from BuzzFeed Media, which notoriously has gone through numerous firing sprees as their clicks and views continuously seem to drop. Meanwhile, their trajectory is very reminiscent of Gawker, which has a rather similar name and was driven to bankruptcy through their lawsuit with Hulk Hogan, a lawsuit which turned out to be, in part, funded by Peter Thiel, a billionaire who had been feuding with Gawker for multiple years. The Gawker assets were sold to Univision, which would move the Gawker assets to the Gizmodo Media Group, before Gizmodo got sold to the Great Hill Partners equity firm. Then again, Walter's struggle with the algorithm change is very similar to what happened to Mashable and many similar sites when Facebook essentially massacred new media outlets with its algorithm change, pushing the switch to video. MTV News, Vulture, Mike, which may or may not have gone on a firing spree to prevent unionizing, a bunch of similar outlets went on layoff sprees and started pushing the pivot to video, hoping to survive this change. Only to find out, Facebook was greatly exaggerating how well videos perform on their site. But the most obvious comparison has to be Vice, and even Vice is aware of this. According to a Vice article, not only does Walter mirror Vice in corporate behavior, with its beehives in the place of vegetable gardens, its foul-mouthed founder in the place of Vice's equally foul-mouthed founder, the type of articles it puts out, and its conglomerate owners being an imitation for Vice's conglomerate owners, Fox. Apparently, it visually borrows a lot from the Vice offices as well. In terms of layout, both are very similar, with the open floor design, the neon sign of the company's name, and apparently the exact same picture of a weed farmer. Vice was a clear inspiration for Walter, though it's safe to assume it's really an imitation for the new media landscape as a whole, as countless companies follow the same model to end up going down the same path. Conquered by the conglomerates that control every other piece of media we consume.
You know, it's interesting, Dad, because I hear everything he's saying, and it almost sounds like a good pitch, but I call bullshit. I spent some time down there, and I'm just not seeing it. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they're fakes. Fucking beehives, almond milk, and take another week on that report, Matilda. It smells wrong, and they're hiding shit. Speaking of hiding shit, I took a couple of their staffers out, I got them shit-faced, and apparently they're looking to unionize. And fucking soon.
Oh, yeah?
Pay transparency, bargaining rights, just nasty, tangly shit. And it's not a body pit, whatever the fuck a body pit is. It's a fucking muesli pit. And it doesn't fit with our core, values. So now I'm thinking we just shutter the fucker.
As mentioned earlier, while both these issues are certainly large conflicts in their respective episodes, they aren't that prevalent in the series as a whole. Part of the genius of Succession is the notion that these huge decisions, most of which affect hundreds of people at the very least, really happen as a smaller part of the family and corporate drama. The conflict is not the moral struggles of firing everyone at Walter. It's whose investment will Dad choose to kill off, and who can kill it off most efficiently. The larger concern will always be, who will Daddy side with? We understand that to these huge media conglomerates like Waystar Royco, the real world most of us live in is so far away that our issues seem more like nuisances than problems. Pieces of the puzzle that are huge to those affected by them, but small in the view of the Roys, or any other billionaire family. The way the show puts less focus on these issues than on the family issues creates a feeling that they are not that important, which is exactly how the Roys feel. Thank you so much for watching. Although most of my videos are not like this one, I would still appreciate if you checked out some of my other videos. Hopefully you find something you like. Please consider subscribing and recommend any show or movie you may enjoy. Who knows? I might make a video about it.
Yeah. I will go. I just want to say, I think, I think I owe it to my country to say, I don't think you should crown or make Connor president. That's it. Thank you. Good night. Sorry.